Allowing you to.
Hi, this morning. Hey, can give another round of applause for the incredible powerhouse women that have been on the stage so far this morning. Despite the morning, and I am so thrilled to be here with you today. As you heard in my introduction, yes, my name is Kindra Hall, and if you were to distill my title down to two words, let's say, it would be professional storyteller. Which I feel like I should start here. If any of you hear that title and you're thinking to yourself, that sounds made up, it is. Okay? Yeah? I made up my job, but the truth is I discovered the power of a story as you're looking to go all in on everything that's happening here today. I was at a very young age. I told my very first story when I was 11 years old and I was in 5th grade. Now, I got to tell you, 5th grade, not a great year for me, okay? For a couple of reasons. Number one, I was recovering from a truly awful haircut from 4th grade. Did any of your mothers do this too? I had this beautiful long hair, and then my mother decided that it would look really good as a pixie haircut. She said it would look nice on my bone structure. So she cut off all of my hair. It did not look good. Okay, it just led to a whole lot of ridicule from the mean 5th grade friends. That was one of the reasons. The second reason 5th grade was kind of iffy for me is I feel like, and I don't know, tell me if you think this is true. 5th grade is like that first year where you start to wonder, who am I? Right? Who am I in this world? Where do I fit? How do I make my voice be heard? And I got to be honest, it was awkward. I was struggling. It wasn't very clear to me. And to make matters worse, I had this best friend who had it all figured out. The girl was perfect. How many of you had one of those best friends, right? Perfect. First of all, she was absolutely beautiful. She had this long hair, long being the operative word there, okay? Long hair and these big brown eyes that could like turn green when she needed them to. I'm talking at her, and all of a sudden her eyes would change. She was just mesmerizing. And all of the girls loved her because she was kind and she was loyal, and the teachers adored her because she was smart and engaged. And the boys, which let's face it, they're the ones that mattered the most at that point, the boys. If a 5th grade boy could go to a tattoo shop and have a name tattooed across their arm, they all would have her name because even her name was perfect. Molly. I know. I remember walking down the wide elementary school hallway side by side with my best friend Molly. We could never go anywhere without each other. And the principal, the most powerful man in the school, would come walking towards us, and every single time he would see us and he would stop and he would do this thing with his hands on his hips. He would go like, "Hey, Molly, Molly." Looking back, a little inappropriate, okay? It was the early 90s. It was a different time, right? So we go, "Hey, Molly, Molly," and then he would just keep on walking, like I wasn't even there. I remember many a night crying to my mother, wishing I could find that thing to make my voice be heard. And then it happened. It was at the very end of my 5th grade year. We were all given an assignment. We were supposed to choose a children's book and then go read it to a 3rd grade classroom. I chose the book, The Giant's Big Toe. Do any of you know it? No, it's not a great American classic, okay? But I chose that book anyway. I remember taking the book and reading it, thinking, you know, this is a good story, but maybe I could do something with it. So I added some emotion to it. I added some feeling. And I remember walking into that 3rd grade classroom where I'm supposed to read my book. And it was at the very end of the school year, at the very end of the day. Do I have any teachers in the room? We have a few teachers. Let's hear it for those teachers, right? And the kids, these 3rd graders, were bouncing off the walls, right? They were pure chaos, picking bugs off each other. The teacher was sitting in the back of the room, like, just please let the bus come and take these children away. All right, that's the point that we were at. And I walked in with my book, about a giant's toe. And I thought, well, this isn't going to work. I can't just read this to them. So I decided to put the book down. And I just started telling the story. And within those first few sentences, I held those third graders in the palm of my hand. And I'll admit, I kind of liked the power. Right? I could make them do anything. I finished telling that story and a light bulb went off. Maybe if I wanted my voice to be heard, to spread my message and share what I know to be true and good in the world, all I need to do is tell a story. Let me tell you, I didn't go back to fifth grade for the rest of that year. I was on tour in my school. Kindra is the giant's big toe, which wasn't great for my popularity, but that really wasn't what it was after anymore. I remember walking down on the very last days of school, side by side, those wide elementary school hallways with my best friend, Molly, and the principal, came walking towards us. And he did the thing that, hey, Molly, because he couldn't help himself. God bless that man. Anyway, but then he turned to me and he said, Kindra, I heard you've been telling some great stories. Keep it up. And so I did. Yes. And now I am here. Okay, now I am here with all of you, and here is the reason why. I know that you know that at this moment in time, it is time for all of your voices, individually, collectively, to be heard. It is time to go all in on what you have and what you know to be true. And to do that, the best way to do that is through the stories you tell. And make no mistake, these are stories you already have. All you have to do is know how to use them, and that is what we're talking about here today. Are you excited or what? Good news. That's good news. And you know what? The other good news is, even if you weren't excited, it doesn't matter. I have enough excitement for the possibility of your stories to go around. Okay, so here's how the rest of our time together this morning is going to break down. First, in order for you to harness the power of your stories, it's really important that you understand why storytelling works so well. I know that you've heard a lot about stories, but what's really happening when we tell stories, when we hear stories? From there, we're going to move into, let's call it a clarification of what a story actually is, which I know sounds ridiculous because stories are the building block of human communication. But here's the thing, storytelling, tell your story, has become a buzzword, okay, which is great. It means more people are aware of the power of story. It means a little bit of job security for me in my made-up job. My dad is finally proud of me. Like, these are all good things. However, anytime a word or concept becomes a buzzword, we disconnect a little bit from what that actually means, which means each of you are missing key storytelling opportunities. And then finally, I want you to walk out of this room here today with some very specific, foolproof strategies so you can start telling your stories better than you already do. All right, so let's do this. First, why does storytelling work so well? Well, let's start here with stories having the innate ability to communicate the true value of something. How many of you have ever gotten stuck in a price conversation when you're talking to somebody about NuSkin, right? They're like, but the money, right? Or how many of you have ever had a conversation with someone and you're like, oh, if they only understood the value of not just the products, but the opportunity, or not even just the opportunity, but this community, this family, that they will become a better version of themselves simply for saying yes. How many of you have ever felt that little glitch? Like, why don't they understand? It's because humans don't want to make our decisions based on logic. Now, that's how we'll make them if we have no other choice, but our preference is to make decisions based on the emotions that we feel. And how do you get someone to feel something, to feel the potential value that is there for them? You tell them stories. Now, anthropologists wanted to put this to the test to see, what do people buy? Do they buy the thing and the bullet points about it, the science behind it, the descriptions, or do they buy the story of the thing? And just for fun, how much will they pay for it? So here's what they did. They gathered 200 objects. Now you can see on the screen there, they spent a total of $250. So it's not like they were breaking the bank or anything, but then they took each one of those items and put them up on eBay with a story to see what people would pay for them. Let's take a look. Here, this is a used pink horse toy. One of the items, okay, you can see they spent $1 on it. Now before I go any further, can we all just come to an agreement that things from the 80s, clearly this is an 80s horse, judging by its very goofy mane, those pink hooves and the silver leg. How many of you had that outfit? I had that outfit. Can we all agree that things from the 80s are not vintage? Can we agree on that? Yes. Thank you. I feel seen. This is not a vintage horse. This is just an old used toy. Okay. So they put it up on eBay for $1, but then they wrote a story. Now here's the story. The story was of a woman, a family, actually, parents who had recently dropped their daughter off at college. Have any of you dropped a kid off at college? Yeah, I dropped my kids off at middle school. I thought I was going to die, so I'm not looking forward to the whole college situation. But the mother came home, feeling sentimental, started going through some of her daughter's things. She came across this pink horse, and suddenly she had a memory. And it was that every day, this horse, at the end of the day, was the first thing the mother saw, because her daughter would be kneeling at the windowsill, trotting the horse across the windowsill, waiting for her mother to come home from work. First thing the mom saw at the end of every day. And the mother hoped that whoever purchased this horse would use it as a reminder that though the days can sometimes feel long, the years are oh so short. Wow. Sweet story, right? Sentimental. How many of you are like, oh, someone bought this horse for $104.50. Now, I hope you're kind of chuckling to yourself. I also hope you're feeling a little uncomfortable with that, because is the horse worth that? No, it's worth $1, okay? But what did the person buy? They didn't buy the horse, right? They bought the story of what that horse could mean in their lives. It was the story of being present, of nostalgia, of seeing the beauty of your life before it passes you by. And how many of you could use that reminder from time to time? Make no mistake, if you're getting stuck in price conversations or value conversations, it means that you're trying to meet them at a logic and what they really need. What they really need are the stories behind the ingredients, the stories of what the science can mean in their lives. Now, how many in here do we have? Just ask. Do we have any goal-oriented people in the room? Just a few. Okay, we have a couple. I feel like it would be very fair of me to show this to you without showing you the final results. Okay, so should we see how this worked with the strategy and what it meant for them? Remember, they spent $250. They made $8,000. Okay, that is a 3,100% increase on their efforts. Now, I want you to think about what this means for you and your NuSkin business and going all in. You start layering stories, telling the stories of what this means in your life. What kind of difference could it make in the understanding of the value that you're here to offer? Okay, that's the first reason. Let's talk about the second reason that stories are so important, and that is stories are how we connect with people since the beginning of time. This has been actually the topic of my third book, The Story Edge. This has been our evolutionary edge. It's sharing stories, human to human, to explain high concepts and to connect with people on a different level. Now, to put this to the test, the ability for stories to connect, we're going to do a little audience participation. All right, so here's what I want you to do. Turn to your neighbor, say good morning. That is not the entirety of the exercise. Don't get your hopes up, okay? And for those of you who turn to multiple neighbors, you're going to have to choose one, okay? The overachievers, whichever one you like the best. So no, I'm just kidding. But we can have a few groups of 3. That's fine. Now, here's what I want you to do. Part 1 of this exercise. I want you to turn to that neighbor. And I want you to tell them, you don't have to tell them a story. We're not going to get ahead of ourselves here yet, but I want you to tell them about the importance of perseverance. How many of you have had to persevere before in this business or beyond? Yes, of course, we've all had to persevere. So just take a moment, you each get a turn and talk about the importance of perseverance and go.
Perseverance.
Good job.
Para mí, la perseverancia es hacer las cosas constantemente.
All right, switch if you haven't already. Switch. All right, come on back to me. Come on back. How many of you learned something nice about perseverance? How many of you have had to talk to your team before about the importance of perseverance? They're afraid of facing rejection. This is a message that leaders have to deliver on a regular basis, both inside this industry and without. All right, great. Now we're going to move into part 2 of this exercise. Are you ready? I want you to turn to that exact same neighbor, but this time, I want you to tell them about the first time or the worst time you fell off your bike. Now, for whatever reason, you've never been on a bicycle before, then maybe it's the first time or the worst time you tried to bake something, first day of school at a new school, right? But the first time or worst time you fell off your bike, go.
So I had to stop. I stopped and I just fell inside. So I just and there were 2 dogs. And the 2 dogs.
Switch if you haven't already. Everyone get a turn up.
And the 2 dogs also all trying to bite my head. Trying to like fight myself on the bike. And so trying to like hang off the dogs.
All right, come on back to me. Come on back. Up there, take a minute. Keep going. Don't worry, if you can hear me right now, you're getting worried. You guys lost complete control of the room. Just know that this happens every time, right? Started telling stories. It's almost impossible to get to stop watch. This is the oldest trick in the book for speakers, presenters, like me, teachers. Give yourself a round of applause, everyone. He's still here. He's still here. There's always a few left. All right. Great job. Let's talk about what just happened in the room here right now. Now, I get a different perspective than all of you get because I get to see kind of as a whole. So let's talk about it first on a big macro level. How many of you, first of all, thank you so much for participating. And you did a great job talking about perseverance. We're all very serious about how important persevering is. But did you notice the volume in the room was like 2 times louder when you were telling the story of the bicycle? Did you hear that? The energy in the room was different. And not only that, but as I looked around the room, the whole room started to move. You were leaning in and out. You were going, and then there was a lot of, some of you, this is not how you ride I didn't realize you were all from such mountainous regions. There was a lot of accidents, and the way, actually, the point of going to the way that you all laugh at each other's pain, very telling. That's a story for a different time. But it was a completely different experience in the room between those 2 messages, and the reason for that is when we are telling our stories, we are simply more ourselves. You heard earlier about being authentic, and so many times we think, especially, I mean, you're business owners, you're talking about very scientific, top level products and an exquisite opportunity, and you feel the need to do it justice by being very serious. But when we tell our stories, we are more ourselves. People want to do business with you as yourself, and it gives them permission to be for themselves as well. And this is how we build these relationships, because ultimately this is a relationship business, isn't it? Don't you feel like you know the person you're sitting next to a little bit better now that you've heard their story, right? About buying up. Don't you like them a little bit more? Because some of you are like, no, that person is nuts. That is a maniac of a woman sitting next to me. Okay. But you know someone more when they share their stories. This is how we build trust. This is how we build bridges quickly and deeply. And one last advantage of using your story. Wouldn't it take just a small adjustment of your bicycle story to make it a story about the importance of perseverance? Unless it was the last time you were ever on a bicycle. And then yes, you will have to find a different story to illustrate the importance of perseverance. But when you're out there having to discuss and put into context these high-level concepts, use your stories to do it. All right, and the last reason that storytelling is worth your investment, worth going all in on, so that you can go all in on everything that you're doing right here, is ultimately stories are the thing that sticks. Story is what we remember, and there's a reason for that. It's that the storytelling process by default is a co-creative one. So for example, as I am telling you my story, you are creating your own version of it in your mind. You're taking my words, yes, but you're adding to it your own images from your life experience, your emotions, your desires, your hopes. Let me ask you, how many of you, when I was telling you the story about 5th grade, imagined your 5th grade best friend? Could any of you see your 5th grade best friend? Yeah. Or how many of you pictured when I was talking about walking down the wide elementary school hallways? How many of you could see the hallways from your elementary schools? Yes. Okay. So you're raising your hand, nodding your head because I know what I'm doing up here. I don't know how else to describe. I know that by sharing this information with you in the form of a story, you will meet me halfway. And as a result, the message will mean more to you, and you will remember it longer. Rudyard Kipling said it, if history were taught in the form of a story, it would never be forgotten. How many of you are here enduring the ups and downs of entrepreneur life because you want to be forgotten? No, you want to be here. This is how you leave your legacy. This is how you make a difference. Your voice is heard. through all of the stories that you tell that they will remember. Okay, so all of these great things that a story can do, and yet there is a problem. We hear so much about telling your story, and this is my story, and here's my story, that we've lost the meaning of what a story really is. So what I'd like to do right now is actually talk to you first about a few of the things that a story is not. We'll talk about what a story is, and then I'm going to show you a case study so you can see the difference the story makes. So let's start here with what a story is not. These are many of the common offenders. It is not a bullet point list of ingredients or benefits. You heard one of the women up here say facts tell, stories sell, right? You want to talk about the ingredients because they're fascinating, yes, but what is the story of when those ingredients have made a difference in your life, or what have they enabled you to do? How many of you have felt the co-creative process starting by reading the back of a label? No, it's not the label, it's the story of what can happen. Impressive science, the same thing. Yes, it's great to have the science, but what your people want to know is what that science will mean in their lives. It's not a long, drawn out history lesson about your entire life. Now, I know some of you, you're like, oh, I do that, right? Where you're like, I'm going to tell my story. And then you talk about every terrible thing that has ever happened in your life, right? No, that's just a history lesson. That's just a timeline. And finally, it's not high level jargon or values or promises or principles. For example, how many of you are passionate about what you do? Yes? Let me hear it. Passionate? Yes. But there's nothing less passionate than saying, I am passionate about my business. Right? Just saying the word passion isn't painting the picture, a co-creation of what that passion means. For example, I was working with a woman in your industry, and her why, the reason that she engaged in this business was to have more time freedom to spend with her children. How many of you is that part of your why? Right? To have more time freedom. Okay, great. And so I said, all right, so tell me about that. What does that look like? What does it feel like? And she said, it feels like more time freedom. Right? Which is great, but what is that? So with a little bit of effort, we found an amazing story. You see, she'd been working full time, which she was very good at the job that she did. And every year at her kids' school, they had this day called Author Day, right? Where the kids would dress up either as their favorite character in a book or their favorite author. It was a big deal, costumes. There was a big Author Day parade, and every year this mother would dress her kids up. She would put all the work into it. She would drop her kids off at school, and then she would drive to work. And at noon, she would start getting pictures on her phone of her kids in the Author Day parade, taken by other mothers, because she couldn't be there, because she didn't have the time freedom to leave work. And she decided one year that this was the last year, that she was going to double down on the work in this business. She did that, she put in the effort, and the next year, when Author Day came around, she dressed her kids up, she dropped them off at school, and yes, at noon, her phone was filled with photos, the Author Day parade, that she herself had taken, because this business had allowed her to leave her job and have all the time freedom to be the mother she wanted to be for her children. Right? Now, doesn't that feel, if my leg hairs grow, just don't zoom in on my leg hairs, please, okay? But doesn't that feel different? Doesn't that make time freedom the meaning of more? You have these stories but you need to be telling them. So let's talk briefly about what a story actually is. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end to a story. You've heard this. It doesn't help you much. You have a different way to think about it. It's just a bit. A story happens in a particular moment, a moment when you have the realization, a moment when you have someone come to you and say, you've changed my life, and you can see it right there before your very eyes. There are emotions in a story, not just the information. And finally, there are characters to care about and something at stake. Now, I know showing you two side-by-side slides of what a story is and what it isn't going to help you very much. So what I'd like to do now is play for you a short video. Now, you can look on the screen here. This is a video about a brand called Soul Carrier. Yes, it's a purse company. It has absolutely nothing to do with what you do. However, this is a woman, an entrepreneur, selling a product, a part of a brand, and she wanted to tell her story through this video. It went on our website. It was going to be on her social media. I hope you can tell. The large air quotes, okay, that she does not tell a story in this video. That's the spoiler alert. There is no story. But what I want you to do is watch this video, and afterwards, I'm going to ask you what you think. All right? Let's roll the tape.
Okay. Close your eyes. Okay. Breathe.
All right, ready? Yeah.
What it means I'm being who I was born to be. I'm creating and I'm designing and I'm living my dreams. And this is the ripple effect of just finally getting to the place of doing what I so passionately love and want to be. A lot of people view me as the girl who lost my parents in college. I was the girl that was supposed to carry on Paisan and Joyce's legacy, but deep down, I want to be me. I want to be Jennifer Page. I want people to look at me and be like, she listened to her own intuition. She listened to her heart and she followed her dreams. Soldier is a fashion brand and it designs handbags, but it's so much more than that. I want it to be about encouraging young people to be who they are, to follow their dreams and to not get swept up in the white noise, but to know that if there's something that they want to do, to go after it and do it all their heart and all their passion. If you're doing what you're meant to do, you will get there.
All right. Nice, right? Okay. And so let me ask you in this way. I told you I was going to ask you what you thought of the video. How many of you thought that video was actually pretty good? But it's the before video. You saw it on there, so you know it's the bad one. Okay. Yes. So now raise your hand. How many of you thought that video was actually pretty good? Okay, good. It's okay. I feel like we should just get this out in the opening. You can do pretty good things and not tell a story. She was talking about following her dreams, pursuing her passion. These are things that all of you talk about, right? Pursuing your passion, following your dreams, and yet she did not tell a story. The question is, how differently would you feel about the product, about the person? Because make no mistake, they are buying you. They are saying yes to you if she had told a story. And here's the biggest mistake that happens when it comes to telling our stories in your business. Here it is. We allude to the story, but we don't actually tell it. We mention there's a story there, but we don't tell the story. We talk around it, and so then we don't reap any of the benefits. I spent the whole first half of this presentation discussing. Let me ask you, how many of you heard what the story might have been? Did you hear her say it? Yeah. That she lost her parents in college? How many of you heard her say that? Yeah. And even when she said it, didn't your brain go like this? I'm about to hear a story. Because your brain wants to hear a story because you're all humans and that's how humans are programmed. But then she kept going, so you kept going, and no one was the wiser for it. And what we got was a pretty good video. How differently would you feel about the brand, about the product, about the person if she had told that story? Good news, you don't have to wonder. We have an after video. So I got together with Jen, and it turns out that moment with her parents really was a catalyst for her. Her life was going in one direction. Suddenly it went a different direction. We reworked the script so that she told the story. I want you to watch this video and see if you can tell the difference. Let's roll the tape.
Suppose my story starts like anyone else's. My parents wanted what was best for me and not to have to experience the struggles that they did. So I pursued a business degree, and then afterwards I planned to pursue law school. Then when I was 21, my life changed. I woke to find myself hanging upside down by my seatbelt. My family's SUV had flipped over several times, hitting the base of a concrete billboard before coming to a stop. Both my parents were taken from me that day. My mom was killed instantly, and my dad died hours later in the hospital. I knew that saying goodbye to two people I loved would be hard, but what I wasn't expecting was how hard the aftermath. Everyone was wondering what I would become in light of this tragedy. There was a lot of pressure, scrutiny, a lot of noise. I'll never forget the last words my mother said to me. She was sitting in the passenger seat of the car, and seconds before the accident happened, she turned around and she said to me, "Where do you want to go?" The next moment was chaos, and she never even got to finish that sentence. But her voice, that question, "Where do you want to go?" is forever frozen in my memory. Decided the best way to honor my parents is to find the answer that worked for me, for Jennifer Page, not for anyone else. Soul Carrier is the manifestation of that. Every handbag I design is created to serve as a daily reminder, to ignite people to do what they're meant to do. I don't know where to be when someone asks you that question, where do you want to go? Or if you will have to ask it of yourself. But when that day comes, I hope that Soul Care can be a reminder to tune out the noise and to choose the path you were meant for.
So let me ask you, could you tell the difference?
Sure.
I know, isn't it shocking? Isn't it shocking to think she didn't tell that story right from the start? Doesn't the name Soul Carrier mean something different to you? For a while, Jen was getting more speaking engagements than I was, which was irritating, to be honest. But people wanted to hear that story. Now, before I continue, there are two people that I need to talk to in this room right now. All right. The first person is the person who is watching that video and thinking to themselves, I have a story like that. I have a story that big, that hard, that tragic. And maybe you're thinking, and this is why I tell that story, because yes, your big, hard, heartbreaking story can be the story that someone else needs to hear so they can keep going in their own story. Or maybe you're thinking, I have a story that big and I'm not quite sure if I'm ready to tell it. And I say to you, that's okay too. Give it time, give it space. And when you're ready, tell that story. That being said, the second person I need to talk to in this room is the person who watched that video and thought to themselves, I do not have a story that big. Like, who am I to tell my story? Who would want to listen? And to you, I say, it isn't the magnitude of a story that matters. It's the decision to share even the small stories of our life, to give pieces of ourselves, our lessons, our perspectives, to allow people to connect with us. So even if your life is a compilation of small stories, be sure that you tell them. And with that in mind, I now want to share with you some very specific foolproof storytelling strategies to help you get better at telling your stories. Now, do we have any type A people in this room? A few of you? Okay, good. Me too. These next slides are going to go by very quickly. Here's how you can get them. Take a picture of this slide right here. You're going to send a text message to that phone number, 33777. In the message, you'll write the word storytelling, all one word. You'll hit send. I'm going to ask you for your name, your email address. And after you send that, I will send you these next slides and also weekly storytelling videos to keep your skills sharp. But do it today. You don't want next week's slides, all right? You don't want next week's slides. Take a picture. So let's go. Okay. Foolproof storytelling strategies. The storytelling process really breaks down into 3 separate parts. First, you got to find them. Then you have to put them together in a compelling way. And finally, you get to tell them. Let's start right here with finding the stories. It's never a matter of not having them. It's a matter of unlocking them. So what I'd like to give you is a list of prompts. These are questions, lists that you can make to help unlock some of your powerful stories. Make a list of first. How many of you remember the first time you were introduced to NuSkin? Raise your hand. Yes, of course you do. That's a great story to tell. How many of you remember the first time you tried the product or felt a result? Yes. How many of you remember the first time someone came back to you and said, thank you so much. You've changed my life. That is the first story that you can tell. Make a list of the features and benefits, yes, but go one step further. When have you seen them in action? What have they meant in someone's life? What have they enabled you to be able to do? Make a list of your customers. Now, sometimes it's really hard to keep track of all of our customers because we have so many, but if you make a list of their names, the stories will start coming back to you of the impact that you've had on their life, and those are amazing stories to tell. Make a list of the most common questions and or objections. Do you get the same questions over and over again? Yes. You get the same objections over and over again? Yes. Those are opportunities for you to tell someone the story. How many of you here, I don't have enough time for this business. Anyone? You hear that a lot, right? So how many of you have a story that either you have experienced, someone on your team has, of how this business actually gave them more time? Yes? Tell that story. Lessons learned the hard way. How many of you have learned a lesson the hard way in this business? Raise your hand. I know these are great stories to tell. This is how you teach your team. And finally, tell the story of the moment you discovered your why. Your all-in moment. When you knew this is what you were meant to do. It can be a small moment. It can be a big moment, but tell that story. Next, you have to craft the story. Now, you heard earlier, story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It doesn't help you very much. From now on, think about your stories like this. Normal, explosion, new normal. What was, what happened, and what is now possible as a result. Oftentimes we start in the middle. I found this product and now this is possible. I started this opportunity and now all these great things are happening. But where is your new person sitting in their story? They're sitting in their own normal. They need you to tell that part of the story. So maybe you met this woman, look at her. She's really struggling. She's never recognized. There's always more months at the end of the money. And then she comes to you. And now look at her. She's feeling good. She feels great. She gets recognized all the time. There's extra income for her. She has a whole team of people. She feels so good that she decided to spend $104.50 on a huge big course. Here's the thing. If you start there, they're not going to believe it. You know the beginning of these stories. So start with the normal. And then finally, we have to tell the story. So many of the people who have graced the stage before me, even here this morning, have talked about sharing their stories. But keep in mind, person to person, this is how we build relationships quickly that go deep. Any events, if you're hosting events in your homes or around your community, even virtually. If you're flattened out by a screen, tell your story to re-dimensionalize yourself on social media. For those of you who are nervous about social media, now you know. All you have to do is tell your stories and people will engage. And finally, some of the most important stories that exist in this business are the stories that people tell you. But how do you get someone's story? You cannot say to them, so what's your story? It's awkward. They won't know what to say. But if you tell a little of your story first, they will respond with stories of their own. And the last thing I want to leave you with, the topic of my second book, Choose Your Story, Change Your Life. The most important story that exists for any of you, especially as entrepreneurs, are the stories you tell yourself. All day, every day, we are telling ourselves stories of who we are, of what we're capable of what we can and cannot do, what we do and not deserve. And the problem is most of those stories are negative. They keep you from going outside of your comfort zone, or at the very least make you feel a little bit more miserable than you should. But you have the ability to carefully curate and choose the stories you tell back to yourself. For example, I have one of these stories. I was first getting started in my business of what I do. Now I mentioned I have 2 kids. My son is 13 and he is still my sweet, sweet boy. And I have my daughter. She's about to be 12 and she's also sweet. She has this big blonde hair and I call her a force of nature. My mother calls her karma. It's all coming true. So, and it was when my business was just getting started and I was going through all the ups and downs and asking myself, is this worth it? Is this what I'm meant to do? Maybe I should quit. Maybe I'm failing my children. And I had all the negative stories, the failures, the rejection. And then I asked myself, is there a good story I could tell myself? And sure enough, there was many, but one stood out. It was when my daughter was about 3. We were at home in her bedroom. It was very pink. We were building something on the floor with blocks. She looked at me and she said, Mama, we are building a castle, which was helpful because I had no idea what we were building. And it was clear I was supposed to know. Okay, so I appreciated that bit of information. And she said, and we live in this castle, Mama, because we are 2 princesses. I know, to be seen as a princess by your daughter when there's so many alternatives. I took that as a win. Okay, so that was good. And then she looked at me one more time and her eyes did this thing, and you know that something's about to come out of that mouth. And she said, and it's a big castle, Mama, because we are 2 princesses who go to work. And the pride she had for me and her being working princesses, pursuing our passions. And in that moment, I saw it, I knew it. It was a story I would never forget. That maybe I wasn't failing of my children. Maybe I shouldn't quit because maybe what I was doing, that by building my dream and pursuing my passion, I was teaching them to build bigger castles of their own. And that is a story I tell myself anytime those bad stories start trying to get me down. I would encourage you to choose very carefully the stories you tell yourself. My friends, we've been through a lot here together today. You now know, yes. Hey, we're not working princesses. So you now know why storytelling works, but story is what it isn't. It's very specific strategies for finding, crafting, and telling your story, because it is my hope that this is just the beginning for you. And that no matter what wide hallways you walk down, no matter who is at your side, no matter what castles you're building, your voice is heard. And you are going all in because you choose to tell a story. Thank you so much for the honor this morning. How makes you hear the stories you tell. Thank you. Thank you.